For some needed relaxation, it was time to leave the suburban life for a while, getting away from the hustle and bustle of everyday life, the constant texts and emails, and not to mention the joys of traffic. It was time to get back into nature. The wilderness was calling me, and it was time to answer. It was time to get back to one of my favorite hidden gems of my hometown, the Colt Creek State Park. For this adventure, I'm doing a solo one-night camping trip on my own. Usually, the family comes along, but this time, I'm by myself. Since it was just going to be me, I brought along my small tent in which I'd call home for the night at the camping site number 5 of the state park. I love this park because there's so many sights to see, you feel secluded and away from the city life, and the park itself is well maintained. There are hiking trails, lakes to go fishing in, kayaking, and plenty of wide open spaces to revisit Mother Nature. It's also a prime spot to do some plein air painting. Since this park covers over 5,000 acres in the green swamp, you can paint 1,000 times out here and still find a new location of inspiration. To close out the night, I plan to have a campfire, so my trusty camping chair is a must to rest my weary body at the end of the day. Since this park covers so much land, I know I couldn't find what I'm looking for on foot, so I brought along my bike to help scout out the area. In the Florida sun, sunscreen is a must. Once that was on, it was time to find some painting locations. Well, the good news is, made it to camp and got everything set up that I'll need for tonight. And now it's time to get on the bike and go scouting around for some different locations that I could possibly paint. I know of one that I am going to paint in the morning, but I do want to find a spot for tonight's painting, because for this trip I want to do 2 paintings in total, and so let's see if we can find a good spot. Amongst all the oak trees and pine trees are little tucked away spots that you can't see from the paved roads. That's what I'm after today. One of the best things about this park is there's 15 miles of multi-use trails that's shared by hikers, bicyclists, and those even riding horseback, that meander through the pine flatwoods, natural creeks, and wetlands. One of the good things about taking the bike out today to scout out the different locations is that the bugs don't bother you as much, because as you're riding and the wind's blowing through, they can't really stop and get on you, except for when you stop and get a drink of water or look at some different locations, then you start to hear the buzzing. If you're going here for sights, I promise you'll find them. There's signs of history of this park all around. There is something that I admire about our old ancestors that used to live in as my daughter would say, the olden times, when there was no internet and there was no cell phones and there was no computers. There wasn't even amusement parks. Instead, nature was your playground. I believe there should be a sign at the front that says, "Welcome to Heaven's Backyard." Now the plates behind me is actually where I did one of my previous plein air videos when I went out and camped out here for a couple days. And what I'm excited to see is I did the painting, which you can check in one of these videos here. But we came out not too long ago, a couple months ago, and this area was all overgrown with the invasive species, and it looks like they've come and been able to clearing it out. So looks like we're making progress with keeping things the way that they're supposed to. While I was riding around, I couldn't let all the sights just pass me by. I had to get off the bike and take in all the sights and sounds the park has to offer. After being on the trails for an hour or so, I've come to a conclusion where I want to do my evening painting. But first, I need to let the sun go down, get closer to the horizon, and wait for the magic hour. The spot that I chose to paint lies on the outskirts of this park. It's the dividing line between the state park and the Green Swamp Wilderness Preserve Hampton Tract. I chose this spot because of the one-point perspective it offers with the tree line, the variation of colors of vegetation, and the story that can come along with it. More on that later. To get started, I have to unload the gear. To get to this location, you have to go off the beaten track. Luckily, I packed light today and was able to fit the gear on the bike. One of the best pieces of advice that I can give anybody that wants to go out plein air painting is make sure that you pack light. So after traveling around most of the day, I decided to start with this area over here. The reason is because it's a different area than what I've been to out here at the state park. Plus, usually when I do a painting, I like to tell some sort of story that goes along with it. And a lot of the parts in the trails that I saw here was just trees and a little landscape. But here, I can tell a little bit different story. I'm not trying to diminish the qualities of the other views of the park. Instead, this area offers a more wide open view that I'm going for. The story that I'm trying to tell with this painting is a relationship between humans and nature. No matter how far out in the wilderness we may go, we're bound to find the effects of humans. Also on today's painting adventure, I'm trying a few things different. One is I brought along a different easel with me, which is more lightweight and not as heavy to carry since I had to come out here from a biking trail. And then the other thing that I'm trying is this watercolor canvas. Most times I paint on watercolor paper, but I keep seeing these watercolor canvases when I'm at the store. And so I figure I'd try it out with this trip. We'll see how it goes. One of the other things that I'm doing is using my travel watercolor palette here, smaller, lightweight. Also still already have some pigments in there, so it's gonna make it a little bit easier because the sun is going down and we won't have much time to paint. So here we go. To get started, just like any other landscape I do, I figure out where I'm gonna put the horizon line. Remember, the general rule of thumb is just don't put it in the middle. For this one, I chose to have it a little bit higher to have more room for the variety of vegetation colors. The vanishing point, I steer more to the left so it doesn't look like we're sitting in the middle of the scene. Next, I start to add in the heights of the electric line poles to have a reference point to how high I need to put the trees. There are 3 structures, and to show a perspective of depth, I create them getting smaller as we go back towards the horizon line. I don't need to draw on any more detail, I'll let the paint do that. To begin, I get a watered down wash of this emerald blue color and start to lay in the sky. I'm not worried about it going over the tree area because I'll let the blue feed the spaces between the tree branches. One of the things I'm noticing about this canvas is the paint doesn't soak into the surface as much as watercolor paper. Next, I start to lay in a wash of terra verte for my green spaces. At this point, I'm trying to rid myself of the whites of the painting surface. I'll go back in later for detail in the different values. I do add a touch of yellow to the left side of the trees because that's where the sun is shining most on. Next up is the earthy colors of the ground. I water down some burnt umber and lay in a flat wash on the ground area. With atmospheric perspective, things in the distance appear more blue. So the tree line in the distance, I use some of the emerald blue with a touch of the terra verte. It's also going to be a lighter value than all the objects that's in front of it. The sun is still shining more on the left, but hints of sunlight is coming through the trees on the right. So I dab some of the yellow and let it blend in. At this point, it's time to start adding in some details. I start by working on the tree lines and create some effects of the top of the trees. I do this just by varying the lines like a zigzag and make some taller and some shorter. I can't put much of a variation of heights just due to how far back these trees are. I'm just trying to create an illusion. One of the things that drew me to this location was the variation of colors in the landscape. Just in the trees alone, it's not just a green, but some blue-green, siennas, yellow ochre, and to give it an artistic flair, I drop in some purples at the base of the trees as the darks. So a couple things from when I first started painting out here. Number one, no matter how much bug spray I put on, these darn things are relentless and won't leave me be. Can you see the bugs? The whole time I'm painting, I'm hearing a constant buzzing in my ear. And sometimes it's easy to block out, and sometimes it's like the whole family came to visit. As far as the painting goes, I'm not sure if I'm a fan of this watercolor canvas yet or not. The reason being is because it really doesn't absorb the paint and the water as much as watercolor paper does, which was kind of to be expected. But at the same time, it's kind of, I'm liking it because it looks more loose compared to my tight style that I normally paint, and which is what I always try to go for, but never can. So I don't know if this watercolor canvas is going to be my answer or not, but we'll see how it goes. Let's continue painting. In between swatting the bugs out of the way, I start to use more pigment and create some darker values. I create the darker values by using more pigment, but then also adding some blues to my greens and sometimes some of the Van Dyke brown. This helps darken it up without the need for using black. It looks darker than what I want when I lay it down, but I also know that as it dries, it's going to be lightening up. One of my new favorite colors is a tube of Daniel Smith brand burnt yellow ochre. As I add it, it creates both the hue of a yellow like ochre normally would, but also has hints of a burnt red due to the burnt part of the name. As I'm filling in the trees, I'm intentionally leaving a flat shade of value for the tree line in the distance, and variations of values as it gets closer to us. This helps give us the illusion of depth. It hints at our eye can pick up more variation of things closer to us. The left side of the tree line I'm using less of blues and more adding yellows due to the sunlit portion of the scene. I'm mixing up where I drop in random parts of darker values to give the illusion of the leaf and branch textures in the trees. With plein air painting, it's not about the detail, just the impression. For the trees, I'm not going to paint every branch and limb. Instead, give indicators of the tree trunks. I do this with a blend of my Prussian blue and Van Dyke brown. For the trees further in the distance, it's just Van Dyke brown, but for the trees closer, I add the blue to darken it up. As for the leaf detail, I don't paint every leaf. That's for the studio work. Instead, I dab in different values of the colors to give the illusion of texture of the tree leaves bundled together. The final detail of the trees I'm adding is some leaf bundles at the top of the trees, but I only do this for the trees closest to the viewer. There's many obstacles that you can face while outdoors painting. I'm sad to say, one of those obstacles is forcing me to call it a day. Well, normally I'm not one to call it quits, but today I'm gonna have to because these bugs are relentless. And I really can't get anything done because I'm having to continually swat them away and get them out of my ears. So at least the good thing is I think I have enough of a foundation on the painting that I can take it back and either work on it at camp or work on it in the studio when I get back home. So wish I could have spent more time out here, but Mother Nature, she beat me today. So gonna pack up camp, go back and grill out some dinner, and then hopefully get up in the morning and go to my location that I've really been wanting to paint since I started coming here. So, time to pack it up. After packing up and taking some reference photos to use later, I head back to my campsite for the night. Once there, I put the food on the grill and return back to my painting. I brought along my computer just for this sort of thing. I open up my reference photos I took while at the spot and begin to work. I continue working on the sunlit trees. I get a wash of cadmium yellow and lay a transparent wash over the greens. I think the bugs followed me back to sabotage me because for some reason my camera zoomed in on its own, or it was the bugs. With watercolor, you're always working light to dark. As I see areas that have dried up and need darker values, I work on them. It always helps to squint your eyes. Your mind will tell you where the lightest lights and darkest darks are. The darkest values are in the shadows of the scene, and also the objects, in this case, the trees closest to the viewer. Using my mix of Prussian blue and Terra Verte, I continue putting in these values. It's also helping give an optical texture to the scene. By just dabbing on the color, it creates the contrast between dark and light areas, giving the illusion of leaf and pine clusters. I continue to put in indicators of the tree trunks in the middle ground. Some of the lines I break apart to give the illusion of branches of leaves in front of it. Next, I turn my attention to the earthly values leading up to the foreground. With the mix of Van Dyke brown and a hint of the Prussian blue, I lay in a wash. I intentionally leave little unpainted spots to give the illusion of the uneven surface of the ground. The ground, with its lush vegetation, has a variety of colors in it. As the brown mixture is still wet, I drop in a variety of other hues such as the greens, yellows, and siennas. My supper is finally done, so it's time to call it a night. I would have liked to continue painting through the night, but more bugs were coming out and the sun was falling fast. It was also a good time to sit down and reflect on this day of painting, and what was good and what was bad. The next morning, I was awakened by a beautiful sunrise. I had slept in later than I anticipated and knew some of my morning was already gone. The best way to get going, so I could get in another painting, was to make my morning coffee. I had an idea, but I sat and thought, where would I paint next?